Hello, everyone, and welcome to our weekly Power Lounge. This is your place to hear authentic conversations from those who have power to share. My name is Amy Vaughan, and I am the owner and Chief Empowerment Officer of Together Digital, a diverse and collaborative community of women who work in digital and choose to share their knowledge, power, and connections. You can join the movement at togetherindigital.com. And today I am so thrilled to welcome Deesha Dyer. She is a social impact strategist, author, transformational leader whose extraordinary journey exemplifies how the power of non-traditional paths to leadership can be so satisfying and so transformative. From a community student, college student, to White House social secretary under the Obama administration, Deesha has navigated spaces where she never expected to belong and thrived. Now, as the founder and CEO of Hook and Fasten, she helps organizations navigate the evolving landscape of leadership, social impact, and equity. Her recent book, Undiplomatic, which our Together Digital members read and loved and actually had Deesha with us for a discussion. It shares her personal story of turning imposter syndrome into confidence and creating systems that allow diverse leadership to flourish. Highly recommend. 10 out of 10 read. Deesha's unique perspective from working at the highest levels of government to her current work centering untapped talent offers an invaluable wisdom and authentic leadership and meaningful change. Deesha, we are so happy to have you here with us at the Power Lounge to meet more of our amazing community. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be in conversation again after the book event. So happy to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Absolutely. We wanted more Deesha. We're like, bring her back. Let's have more conversation. Because, you know, your journey and your experience, I have a lot of women on this podcast, and we always start asking, like, what has your journey been like? And, you know, I'm not a huge fan of success without strife. And I really love when women share their authentic experiences and stories, because it really helps others see themselves in the opportunities that maybe haven't come to them yet, but to know that they're there. So you started off as a community college student and eventually rose to the White House social secretary. It's absolutely remarkable. I loved hearing and reading your story and then getting to meet you. But I'm curious, what was one of the most unexpected lessons you learned about leadership during all of that transition?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I'm continuing to learn about leadership, number one. So even though I've reached this, this high pinnacle of working at the White House, my student journey of learning is always going, right? As I grow and as I discover different parts of the world or myself, right? Which I think is such a beauty. But I think, when I worked at the White House, the leadership journey that I had was unexpected. Right. And I realized that I had everything in me to be a good leader already versus I have to learn how to do this and learn how to do that. Obviously, there are some things like managing people or, changing to the environment that we do have to do. But the core qualities of service, of seeing people, of instilling confidence, of delegation, like all those things are things that were inside of me. They just were activated even more once I got to the White House. And so I think that was a surprise for me because I thought I had to take all these classes or all these certifications or read all these books to kind of be a good leader, which I think those things enhance you as a leader.
Sure.
But to me, I had the qualities already in me.
Yeah. And that tracks, right? I think they say, like, what is it? Men will apply for jobs if they're 60% qualified. Women will wait till they're 110% qualified. And we're like holding ourselves back. And I think one other thing I loved about hearing your story and journey is that there were, and I'm fortunate, I'm a beneficiary as well of people seeing the potential in me and lifting me up and encouraging me. And I felt like that was very similar for you as well, where they were like, Deesha, like, yeah, you are the person to do this. And you're like, oh yeah, you're right. I am, And I think that's something amazing that we can do for others. And I would love to see more men and women do for women in general as well, is just really see that potential in others and lift them up, and call them out for those things. Because when you've got it, you've got it. And, we need to lift each other up from those kinds of situations. So
100%.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about your book, Undiplomatic, and how, especially you're focused on transforming imposter syndrome into authentic confidence, which, those two words, both authentic and imposter syndrome, get used a lot. Yes. So context and stories for me and our listeners are always great. I'd love it if you could share a moment when you realized that you belonged in the rooms that others might have questioned your presence.
I would say just, honestly, for the sake of also really entertaining people that are
Yeah.
listening and here, I would say the Oval Office. I think that when we think of the Oval Office, obviously it's in the West Wing. It's where
Yeah.
the president works and, where he has all these important meetings. She has these important meetings. And for me, being in that space, I was like, am I here like to just like get the water? Like I was like,
Right.
what service capacity could I do, which is again, no problem doing that. But I was like, kind of like, I'm in service of everybody in here versus being on the team of everybody in here, kind of working
Yeah.
together. And for me, that was a big jolt because I, for a long time, was like, I don't really belong in here. Wait till they find out that I, went to community college. I don't have any 4-year degree, but nobody asked those questions. So I think that oftentimes we get in these spaces and like, we're going to be found out, but nobody's asking. Nobody said like, what's your education level before you start talking or before you're invited in this meeting. They saw the qualities of who I was. And so I would say that was probably the biggest jolt for me. Was like hey, like I belong here just like you do. I don't even know where you came from next to me. You know what I mean? So for me to assume that everybody in here is like talking about me is like a little bit of a paranoia. So that for me really helped, me see that I did belong. And that's not to discount the times where, there are forces and people that do work against us that want to see us feel inferior, but thankfully for me, like that was not one of those times.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. I love that you were so seen and supported in that space because it can be such a challenging environment. Again, when it's like something like social secretary is a highly competitive and sought after role, is it not? I mean,
it's extremely sought after. And for the listeners, just also who don't know what that is, the social secretary is in charge of all of the events in 1600 Pennsylvania. So like actually the White House. So everything from private events to public events to large events. And it's a very social position that people see.
High visibility, high stress, high pressure. That's a lot. And for you to have stepped into that and just really owned it, and again, like truly done it so well, is impressive. And it's one of those things I think it's like everybody's just, a little bit of faking it till they make it. I always say courage comes after the action, not before. And that being brave is just being afraid and doing it anyway.
Yes, very much so.
Because when you get into a room like that, it's like you have to make the most of it. And I think that internal narrative of imposter syndrome, I think it sounds like what you did there in that moment was acknowledge that it was like, okay, that's the voice, that's the doubt, but that doesn't make it the reality.
Right. Of course. I think that there's that. Definitely agree with that. But I think there's also the fact of confusing it with being nervous. Like, of course, who's not going to be nervous walking into the Oval Office? You know what I'm saying? Like, that is not something that I've grown up doing. You know what I mean? So I don't know how to do that. So I think that there is the confusion sometimes of like, the confidence factor with the nerves factor. And if you're nervous about something, it's a natural emotion. It's natural to be like scared and nervous. But I think we have to pay attention to it when it starts to seep into our conscious of we're not qualified, we're not talented, we're not worthy nor valued. But it was definitely like a lot of, just me sitting there like not wanting to make any noise. Right? Like, I don't even want to breathe. I don't want to breathe. I'm not going to breathe. I'm just going to sit here and wait to be called on,
Right.
So,
I can totally empathize. One thing I have done with others, if I'm coaching and they're nervous about speaking or being in a certain public, environment, is I tell them to tell yourself you're excited, not scared, because your body physiologically responds the same way when you're excited versus nervous. It's just really just a mindset shift. And then I've noticed that I'm like, okay, I'm just excited to be here.
Yeah,
not nervous. I'm just I'm really excited about this talk I'm about ready to do.
Yes, I know. I'm actually going to implement that. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. It has really helped me, step into some situations. No, not the White House, but in some situations that has really helped me kind of stay grounded and focused as well, because I think this is what I like about you too, Deesha, is like your authentic voice and personality. It feels like, at least having read your book and met you, you're just so true to yourself from beginning to end. It doesn't feel like this huge role and opportunity changed you in any way.
Yeah.
Can you give me some, like, I don't know, this is a bonus question from what I sent you, but like your thoughts on how maintaining your authenticity, like, or maybe I have it later in the questions and I forgot and I'm getting ahead. Here it
You're
is.
good.
Oh, shit. Look at that. I have it right there. Many of our members are navigating careers where they would be the first or the only. It was exactly the next question in their position. What strategies have helped you maintain authentic self while working in highly traditional White Houses well, highly traditional environments like the White House?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And this just means that you're like on point. Like
Yeah.
your mind is on point with the
I'm
questions.
already on track with the questions.
I would say, I would say, the way that I get prepared is looking, number one, looking at my body of work of what I've already done and saying to myself, like, you got through all of these things or situations or jobs or
Right.
tasks or whatever it is, being yourself, and you survived. Like, you succeeded. Not that it's hard, that it was easy, but you succeeded.
Yeah.
And so that is proof that you can get through whatever
Love it.
this is, right? I think that the other thing is, for me, staying close to community was extremely important. So when you walk inside the White House, you walk inside the gate, you're like on the complex, so you're like behind a gate, it's closed, like it's this beautiful space, so you kind of sometimes can get shut out from the rest of the world.
Sure.
That's where you work, it's all the time. And so I would always make sure that I like either volunteered or even in my role as social secretary, brought in community groups for, trick or treating or whatever it was,
Yep.
to be able to, like, I won't say see normal people, but be connected with my community, because it's so easy to keep that distance, especially when you're getting invited to all these fancy things. So I think there's that. And I think the other thing that was, and I probably said this during the book talk too, so you're probably hearing some repetition,
Yeah,
but
it's all good.
one of the most important things was I had to get used to the fact that not everyone was going to understand me or everyone was going to like me.
Yeah.
And I think that once I digested that as nothing personal, but that's just the way we are. Like, we look at different people and we're like, that personality is not for me, or
Can't
that
vibe with
person's a
everybody.
little this. And it's okay. So I had to basically focus on my talent, my worth, my value, and the task at hand, or the job, versus me saying, let me try to change who I am to not make people think about me. Then therefore, then my effort towards a job or whatever it was would decrease, because I would be so worried about how I would look.
Yes.
So I think that I had to, like, and that's probably the hardest one, was like accepting that, like, people were going to talk about me and people were going to say things, and I had to be kind of okay with that, as long as I did my job well.
Right, yeah.
I respected people. I had to be okay with, like, kind of not being liked sometimes, and it sucks.
Right.
But I think that's a key to me remaining who I am.
I love that. That is such fantastic advice. And I agree with you. I'm going to go back to what you said first, which is celebrate the wins. I think so oftentimes we're just like, go, 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 right? We never stop and look at the whole of our existence and career and be like, holy crap, I have accomplished a lot. I have already done so much. I have already survived a lot, and then that going back to that proof time and time again. That's such a great reminder, Deesha. And there's something too, obviously, to likability. There's the likability penalty for women. Studies and research show that they are deemed less likable the higher they go, and that definitely goes for women of color as well. So it's like, you've got that double whammy. And then the point you made, I think, is so important. One, you end up having this like likability exhaustion, right? Because you're constantly changing who you are and not living in your authentic self to make other people happy, which basically kind of just chips away at your soul, right?
Yes.
So exhausting. But the point that you made there that was even more important, I think, for a lot of us that are trying to do our jobs and do it well, is that it probably does impact your effectiveness. If you were literally just walking around not doing what needs to be done because you just want to stay liked.
Yes.
It's a hard place to be in, but
it's a tough place to be. It's a tough place to be. And I think that there's always space for us to improve and be better teammates. So it's not, I am who I am kind of a thing, because I did have to adapt. But there was that, like, you like to belong. You want to be part of a group. And so sometimes when you're not, I can see how people are like, well, let me change myself to be more likable because it's easier. But in the end, I could go home and look in the mirror and say that I remained who I was. Or I could look at little Black girls that would come to the White House and be like, I'm wearing these earrings, I'm wearing my nose ring, but I'm really good at my job. So like, does this really matter?
Be the example.
At the end of the day?
Right. No,
You
you
know?
are. You are being an incredible model by, showing up and being yourself. And I guess I know that's not easy for everybody, and others it comes more naturally. But I will say the other side benefit is I feel like that's how you find your people. It's just
Yeah.
by being a little bit more yourself. And I agree with you. Don't go out and be an asshole. Like nobody wants to
Yeah.
work with a jerk.
Yes.
Be
Yeah.
kind to
True.
others, be respectful, have pride in the work that you do. That's really kind of the minimum. And then outside of that, it's like, yeah, if you can kind of hold that space for yourself, you're really creating an opportunity
100%.
and modeling for others. So I love it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about untapped talent because that's another big focus for you.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common barriers you see for organizations organizations are creating that prevent diverse leadership from thriving?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, but I would say
You're like, where do we start? How much time we got?
I'm like, I know when I read this question, I was like, we have an hour. Yeah. But I would say there's a couple of things. I think that number one, we are still a society that values like the highest of degrees at all times. And I think that definitely there's a space for education and there's a space for those who have gotten that education, the discipline. And I think that that is admirable. However, experience, I think, also plays a huge part in what people can do. I'm obviously a walking testimony of that, that it wasn't, I went to the White House with no degree,
Yeah.
and I still was able to climb the ladder. Obviously, I got my associates when I was there, but I think that we value education over experience.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to level that out a little bit more.
Agreed.
And that'll open the pool to some talent that, kind of see things in a different perspective because they didn't go through the formal education system. So they might have a better way of doing things, right? So I think that there's that. I think that we have not grappled with like what diversity means and the benefit of diversity to our work environments or our industries. And that's obviously not just race, it's class, it's gender, it's sexual orientation. It is all the things. It's like veteran status, right? It's disability, it's age. And I think that we have not done the work inside of many C-suites or companies to say, let's fix our bias. Let's fix like what's going on with us before we just pile, more diversity in to be harmed by us not fixing ourselves,
Yes.
So I think that there's definitely that. And then I think that we have to go outside of our, if I work somewhere, I want my friends to be hired there too, especially my friends looking for a job. I'm like, let me call my friend, but I think that we have to look outside of our friend groups and outside of our associations for talent. Like, I shouldn't be hiring all of my friends. You know what I mean? Like it's all that we think the same. I want different opinions and different thoughts. And so I think that that's another, and then just the exposure. I mean, like, where are these jobs getting posted? Are they even real? Some of these jobs.
Oh my gosh.
What's the exposure just to these top jobs, like helping people getting their foot in the door, is what I really try to do. I can boost up your resume, your application, your name. The rest is up to you, but just getting somebody, helping them get their foot in the door, I think is really important too.
Yeah, I agree. I love it. You started with a great point of like, we have to fix the problem where it lies, which is at the top. And I think that's one thing, for as much as I love, the ERGs that have emerged over the last few years. I was a part of one before they were even called ERGs. I was helping to create one at an agency I worked at. And even at the time, it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm like, why do I, marginalized person in the office who didn't create this problem, have to create the safe space and address and fix the problems and educate all the people on the problem and not get paid to do it?
Yeah, there we go. There we go. I mean, and you care about it as an individual, of course. Much. And so you're going to pour all you can into it. And then next thing you know, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, that's exactly why I'm here. It is exactly why I'm here. I was a Together Digital member first, joined the community while I was at that agency because it was just really hard to really find true diversity and have what felt like safe conversations. I had to go outside the four walls of my company to do that. Yeah. And luckily for me, my company was in agreement and they supported and sponsored me as a member for many years. And so, yeah, it is really, I think it is one of those things that has to start at the top. The other thing, that you mentioned, I think that is important. I keep hearing it over and over again, is that people need to be a culture add, not a culture fit. So we don't fall into the group think, and it's not about everybody thinking alike, but adding to.
Yes.
And then another point you made, it's so great, that job descriptions. Like if you have any hand in helping writing those, I think really looking at them and making sure that they aren't, ableist, that they're not sexist, that they're not, really written in a way that might actually discourage somebody who doesn't have a 4-year degree, for example, even to apply. Like make it specific about the job. But you're right, lived experience. I mean, I went to college for 4 years and studied advertising design, but I've been in the industry for 4 times as long.
Yes. Think about how much
5.
you learned. Yeah. And even just, I always say, like, even just if somebody's, a secretary or an assistant at a place, like it's still like the exposure to, whatever industry and whatever field and sector. And I think at a time where we're talking about, we're worried about the work talent pipeline, it's just like, well, like, it's drying up here. If we don't tap some people, some untapped talent. So
there's a lot out there. Yeah. And I think for those who are that kind of in that position of feeling like they're untapped talent, I do really think it is a lot of looking at the whole of your experience. I think that was interesting too. Again, y'all got to go get the book. But you talk about like your upbringing and your involvement in the community and advocacy and all of those things. And so it wasn't even about ever getting that 4-year degree. It was every volunteer activity, every extracurricular activity that you had from a young age that really helped prepare you to do the job that you ended up getting to do.
Yeah. And Amy, and I think you can probably attest to this, 'cause I'm sure you did not like 10 years ago say, I'm going to run this podcast, but I think that's why staying true to yourself and what you love is so important, because you think that like, this is not going to, I don't know how this is going to benefit me in the future or if it even will. So I think we've gotten to a space where we look at everything that we do as like, can I monetize this? Can I use this to network? And I'm not discouraging that ever, but let's not forget about our creativity and curiosity and just our basic love for things. And I think for me going along, like, being a hip hop journalist, and that was because I really wanted to write about women in the culture. And I was like, I'm so sick of women being just like, oh, we're just dancers and videos. I'm like, no, there's like women producers and rappers and artists, graffiti artists that should be held up. And so I started writing about them, right? And then fast forward to the White House, where it was like this job where it was my role to bring in like culture, and music. And I'm like, I never thought back then, I was like, oh, I'm doing this so this can benefit me years later. So I think that we have to remember our hobbies and our creativity and our curiosity of what we love to do. And I feel like, I really do truly feel like things do align, you just don't know when, and you don't know how, but things do align. And so that's another, making the case for staying true to what you love and who you are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I went to the 3% conference. A former boss at another agency sent me, and that was all about how only 3% of creative directors were women at the time. It was 2012. And that was kind of the impetus that got me interested. And then I got to go another year at this other agency. That's when we started the ERG. And you're so right. Like, I just kind of followed that passion of championing and advocating for women, because up to that point, I had a lot of privilege. I didn't really recognize and realize, like, I had a lot of great male allies and advocates, and because of that, I was able to move through the ranks of agencies and get to creative director at a fairly decent age, considering I actually took a year gap from school, went back to school, and then actually took another 2-year hiatus because of moving to outside of the country, and just doing freelance jobs while I was there. So I mean, it really is the summation of your whole of experience and really following your passions that helps you find your purpose and opportunities, to the point that, like you, I didn't expect it, was standing in the hallway of our national conference for Together Digital. Ironically, the founder ran for Congress just one time. She didn't make it, but she tried. The goal was to kind of not win, kind of lay the groundwork and then come back and run again. But it was a lot for her. Learned a lot about running for political office tangentially.
Yes.
It sure is. And so anyways, in that process, I was like, okay, that's great. You're going to run for Congress, but what about our community? What about this business? She's like, you run it. Like, you've been running our Cincinnati chapter. You want to run a business. Do it. I was like, what? So you're right. 5-10 years ago, if you would have told me I'd be running a company and doing podcasts and talking to amazing women like you, I'd have been like, that sounds awesome and highly unlikely. But again, yeah, following your passion, staying true to yourself. I think both of us, hopefully for our listeners, are serving as, we're not special cases, guys.
No,
there's more like us out there. We just got to talk about it more.
Yeah. And I think that it also excites me because I'm excited to see what else I could do.
Yes.
I think that when I left the White House, everybody was like, what's next? What's next?
Right.
I'm like, sleep. I'm like, but then also just like, I don't know. That's like exciting and terrifying at the same time. But it's like, I know I'm going to work and I know I'm going to do this, but like, what else is going to come? And to me, that's exciting that I get to like be that curious, So,
I love it. I love it. Let's talk about that next phase and next chapter. So you're the founder and CEO of Hook and Fasten. How do you help companies move beyond performative commitments to equity and create meaningful, sustainable change, especially in times like these?
Yes, I think, the way that we do it, again, going back to what I love and what I've always done is really be in community. So I think that for us, what we do with companies is that we say, what are you passionate about? What are your employees passionate about? Or what's your industry? Like what product do you have? And how can we get that to communities in a way that is going to either eliminate a need, food, hunger, housing, whatever it is, or alleviate a need, right? And so we serve as the liaisons, like the corporate social responsibility consultants, right? We serve as that between the corporations and the organizations. And I think that too often times when we do community work and we love it, and I think that our hearts are very well-intentioned, most people, they don't ask the community, what do you need? How can we help? If we're asking you to come in and brainstorm on something, are you getting paid for that? Do you have something that we can just enhance that? And so right now, while the world is really on a very much axis is like tipped over in many ways, we are very focusing on, the essentials, people being able to eat, being able to be housed, employment. And so we're getting companies to now pour into like local food banks, right? And local housing and give vouchers and things like that, because we're trying to show that yes, politics is politics, but we all agree that people deserve food and they deserve housing, right? So if we can take a corporation and say, let's create something where you're able to partner with the local food banks in your area to like help with the deficit that they've just experienced with the shortage. We're not asking you to get political or make comments. We're asking you just to help feed people. And so that is what we create. We create the strategy, the campaign, we execute it, or sometimes we just advise on it too. People just kind of need that. So that's what we do. And I love and I hate the work, like, right. I love it because I love what I get to do, but I hate that I have to do it. Right. So,
Exactly. I say that a lot of times too. My daughter will ask me, Mom, do you think I'll run Together Digital when I'm older? I was like, honey, I would like to think that we don't need affinity groups because everything's fine and everything's good. But, at the rate we're going, probably not. So sure. If you want to run it, it's yours, darling. But I love that. You make such a great point. You think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And there's like that whole self-actualization portion that's at the top, but that's really only something you can start to work into until you've had those basic needs met. And so kind of shift, I don't want to say downshifting, but downshifting almost to get into that part of like people's needs, to me anyways, is more effective. I'll say from like a marketing community standpoint, I think it's been a long held conversation for us more than I think even the recent year or two has shown that, a lot of companies that are, saying they're doing diversity efforts, it's like they're not truly having impact or looking at the numbers or changing the numbers. It's like, let's slap up something on our website. Let's put up something on our social media. And while I would still like to see, and I know a lot of our community would still like to see businesses supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the same time, it's like, okay, well, if we can't all find a way to agree on that, can we at least, I love this, like you said, can we at least agree people need food and housing? And can we put some impact there? Can we help with education so that we are training up a new workforce so that we do have diverse, folks to hire from, things like that. I think it's an amazing way to continue to create impact in what feels like a hard time to, really do what you need to do. to make an
Yeah.
impact. So thank you for the work you're doing there. I'm so glad
No.
that's the direction you chose. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
no, and I love it. And I think that even when it comes to what you were speaking of about diversity and stuff, when we do things like, scholarship programs or mentorship programs between communities and organizations or schools,
Mm-hmm.
one of my first things is, what work have you done as a company, or
Yeah.
what can we help you with to make sure that this is a safe environment for that student that you want to bring
Yes.
in, because
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't want to just generate the wheel of like, we've got these scholars and you're like, right, but if they had a bad experience,
Mm-hmm.
or
They
they
ain't
were
sticking
treated this way,
around.
then, did we do our job? And so we have to ask that question beforehand about
It's
the
a
work
great
that's
point.
being done, in order to start to bring some of these young students or,
Mm-hmm.
second career people into the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's so important too. And I mean, eventually businesses are going to catch up because that work pool,
Yeah.
that talent that's coming in, they care about those things. They're paying attention. And if it doesn't feel like a safe space for them, they're more than happy to leave.
Yes, yes, yes. They are an outspoken generation coming up, and
Yeah.
and so yeah.
Yeah, love it. All right, so let's shift back to the book a little bit. The title
Yes.
is Undiplomatic, and it suggests breaking from conventions. What aspects of traditional leadership do you think we need to leave behind to create more inclusive spaces? I mean, that's kind of a nice segue from our last bit of
Yes.
conversation. So,
Yes. I think that what we need to leave behind is that everybody has to come the same way for it
mhm.
to success. Like, and
Yeah,
that it's not just the education route that I'm speaking of, but even like this mentality of, I suffered, or not even suffered. I went through, 3 rounds of this. And so you have to do it too to get where
yeah,
I get.
mm,
Or, I had to deal with, being a junior associate for 5 years. So you have to deal with that too.
right.
So I think that we need to leave behind the fact that like you have to have like this really rough route. Like for
Hmm.
me, I think of, I don't want you to have it as hard as I did. Like
Yeah,
I would like to leave it easier for you.
love that.
That doesn't mean that like you get off scot free or like you don't learn
Right.
anything or you cut
Yeah.
corners. But it's just like, why should you have to deal with all this? Like, I'm trying to make this easier for you. So there's other battles. So I think some of
Mm,
those, not just the education, but also like, I walk 5 miles in the snow. So you have to do that too in
right.
order to be strong. And you're like,
Hmm.
I think I can get strong other ways. So I think that
Right.
that's one thing I think we definitely should leave behind. And then I
Hmm.
think that we should leave behind like the systems of how people get promotions and people become
Yeah.
leaders even. I mean, it's archaic.
Agreed.
It's not a lot of times based in merit. It's a lot of it's based, you've been here for 10 years, but it's just
Hmm.
like, right. But if somebody's been here for 8 years, but they're really good and maybe did make an, like, can we look at that a little bit? So I think
Yeah.
that the way we do promotions into leadership,
Hmm.
and then the way we recruit to the C-suite, I think could definitely be left behind.
Yeah.
I
For
have big gripes about just like, I feel like sometimes we don't really move people up; we just move people around. And so
Oh, yeah.
sometimes, like we need to move people up to new
Yeah.
perspectives versus moving just the same people around.
Hmm.
So those are some things I think of when you ask that.
I love it. Yeah. I think that's so great. And you're right. Like, I don't know why there seems to be this sense of like an initiation. This isn't the army. We're not like, we're not getting in and fighting battles and wars and things like that.
Mm.
Hopefully not. But like,
Yeah,
I even
right.
see that among other women, right? Where
Yeah.
I hate to say it, this is my call to, all of our women. It's interesting. Together Digital, our members skew a little older. So 35 is our median age, but we've got a lot of active members that are in their 50s and even in their 60s. And we actually just launched a retiree membership because
Oh,
I have women that are like, I'm on a fixed income. I still want to come to the community. I want to be a part of community. I was like,
yeah.
abso-freaking-lutely.
Yeah,
And so
100%.
they get the student rate because it's like you're a student again, but it's in a whole different way.
Yeah, 100%. I love
But I've
that.
heard women say, well, I didn't have anybody to mentor me, or I didn't have anybody explain all this to me. I had to work hard to get
Hmm.
here. So other women, so this is my call to you that's really not the way it needs to be.
Yeah,
I
no.
love what you said. I was like,
Yeah.
doing my little praise hands in my head as you were saying, like, I want to make it easier for
Yeah.
the people that are coming up behind me. And I think that's such a great mindset. I think that's a mindset
Mm.
we all need to share.
Yeah,
Love
100%.
it. All right. So you've worked at the intersection of public service and social impact. How do you see the relationship between corporate responsibility and equity evolving over the coming years?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because when I think about equity and I think about, to me, how simple it should be that if you have something, the person next to you should also have something.
Right.
And it boggles me that people argue about that or have issues with that. But I think a lot of that's power dynamics, like rooted,
Sure.
and just, I want to be powerful. And, a lot of it's power and ego and many other things that many women have experienced. But I do see the fact that, our empathy is wrapped up in equity. Like, we should want somebody to have food and food choices, right? Mm-hmm. We should want somebody to be able to house themselves. And we're not talking about, the bottom of the barrel here. Like, we shouldn't be like, well, you have something, you have this meal and we know it's not healthy for you, but at least you have something. Right. You know what I mean? So I think that I look at it like corporations have the assets, whether it's products, whether it's funds, whether it's time, whether it's services or resources, whatever it is, to be able to even that out. Like, mm-hmm. right? Like, we can't ask nonprofits to continue doing it with the funding cuts and so many other things. Mm. And then them not making enough money to even, a lot of them don't make a lot of money. So they have a high turnover. But mm-hmm. I see them working together. It's saying that, like, we know and believe that you deserve what we have on our tables. You deserve the house mm-hmm. that we have. And to make that happen, we can make that happen. And I think that if businesses work together, we can solve it. There shouldn't be a housing crisis. There shouldn't be, a food crisis. There shouldn't be these things. There is, right? And there's people who are working to, mitigate that. But for me, on my end, I'm like, well, I need to figure out the person that needs to eat right today, like right now. Like, mm-hmm. you know what I mean? Like what's for dinner? Like, we can work on the policy, but what's for dinner? And I think mm-hmm. that corporations, without, again, getting into policy and politics, can have a really, 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 really important hand in that.
Agreed. Yeah. And it always baffled me as well. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like, just because somebody else has doesn't mean I have less.
Yes.
It just means that everybody moves forward. It's like the economic empowerment or the opportunity to empower, us all economically only just makes our whole economy stronger.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's like, it's just really
mm-hmm.
how economics work.
Right.
I don't know. It's like, why doesn't it make sense?
Right. And I think that a lot of us too is just like, I'm happy. Like, please, like, I hope that you mm-hmm. can get the same things I have or even more. Like, I think mm-hmm. that it is a power thing where I don't have that in me. And I don't know if it's how I grew up or whatever, but I don't have it in me to feel that way, to feel that if you have something somehow I'm threatened by your existence or your, mm-hmm. the fact that you can eat. Like, I just don't get it. But I think that's a classism thing that we've got to work on.
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. We could go down a rabbit hole there too, for sure. If any of you guys haven't read the book Cast, check that one out. That's a good one to talk about those social class dynamics and how it is really truly across all different types of societies.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right. So many of our members and listeners are working to create impact in what feels like uncertain times. What are some things that anchor your approach to creating meaningful change when you're facing obstacles? I know you alluded to a couple, but wasn't sure if you had any other good examples.
Yeah. No, I think what I would say, I mean, in addition to a couple of things I said, but I think that, like, hobbies, I know this sounds weird, but like remembering, who I was as a child and the things I loved to do back then, I think are just so important to me because it gets me in touch with, like, the Deesha before, I had to start paying bills and before, like, I could digest the news and before social media. It's like, oh yeah, I remember who I was before that, like this person who just liked to explore. And I think that getting in touch with that kind of like takes you back to a more innocent time when you weren't, like, we all are influenced by different things every day, all the time. And so I say that for people to really lean into their hobbies, they're not frivolous and you're not wasting time and all these things. You're getting in touch with who you were before that. And I think that that's extremely important. And I think the other thing, which I love, is like getting enough sleep. I'm sure, like, the women listening probably who are especially over 40, like we used to be able to stay up. That's not an option anymore.
Nope. 9:30. Like, it's just done.
Right. Or like we'll be able to like go, like stay up and then we used to be like, we're fine the next day. Now I'm not pleasant. Like I need to sleep. I need to lay down. Like I need to. So I think that that's like really important and vital, as we get older, to make sure we take care of our bodies in that way.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, that's our book for April. So members, if you're listening, you still got about 10 days before we do our next book discussion. We're talking about sacred rest is this month's book and theme. So yeah, and there's even a quiz you can take to learn about what kind of rest you need.
Wow.
Because there's obviously different forms beyond just sleep, but to be aware of that. And I love what you said. It made me think about what I'm always telling myself. It's like how in a moment when I am feeling stressed, I'm like, how would I make 8-year-old Amy happy right now?
Yes.
Is it going to go and get ice cream? Is it going to go for a walk in the woods? Is it going to be sitting down and coloring? That's kind of how I ended up finding like my way back to my hobbies and things that I enjoyed was like exactly what you said, Deesha. It was just, I thought back to a time and an age when social conditioning had not got a hold of me yet. And I just liked what I liked. And so that's a good way to kind of a good measure to get back to and figure out what it is that you love doing before the world really interfered.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like the saying goes with that. And I say, hear that saying and be like, what does that even mean? But now it makes so much sense.
Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. We've got a couple questions left. Life listeners, don't be shy. You're more than welcome to drop questions into the chat if you have them. We'd love to hear from you if you have any questions for Deesha. Looking at your career journey, Deesha, what is a one commonly held belief about professional advancement that you've completely changed your mind about?
I think what I would say to this is I think I changed my mind that everybody else is smarter than me, and that's why they've gotten further than me in different ways. Yeah. I think I've definitely changed my mind about that because now I know that it's not true. Right. Like I believe that there are definitely people smarter than me, 100%, and that's fine. Yeah. I think that a lot of it's opportunity and a lot of it's chance and a lot of it's confidence about going for something. So I would say that one of the biggest thing that I think is that like everyone else is smarter than me and that's why they've all moved up or that's why they're in the positions that they are. But a lot of times it's really like opportunity and who you know.
Exactly. That's why I'm writing and talking a lot about the networking gap. Is I think it's a deficit for women in the sense that, networking is not necessarily, wasn't built with women in mind. It's a bit archaic in the ways in which we do it. Doesn't encourage you to often be authentic. It was really funny. I was actually at a university doing a talk to the PRSSA, so public relations student group. And, I gave them one tip and we were talking a bit about how do you start conversation when you feel anxious and nervous? And the gal, one of my friends who was speaking with me, talked about how, she loves to compliment people on what they're wearing. But as I looked out at the audience, like even all these kids, right? College kids, blue and white and black. That was the color palette. I wore this and subconsciously. I was at OSU, by the way. Big old red dress. I didn't even think about it. I got there. I was like, why do I do these things? And I really do. I'll sometimes, like one time I showed up to present a deck for somebody as an MC. And I literally, the shirt I picked out matched the deck. It was stuck in my mind. And I saw the shirt while I was out. I was like, I love that shirt. I'm buying that for that event. And then I show up. They're like, Amy, do you realize your shirt matches the presentation deck?
Wow.
I was like, no. But for me,
I don't know.
Right. So this is my tip there is by the way, I'm not sure if it's a dress or like a blouse, but I love your top.
Thank you.
It's gorgeous. I love it. And so like for me, when I go out, I honestly try to stick out a little bit, by wearing something to give people the opportunity to strike up conversation and comment about something I'm wearing because those are the people I find too. Yeah. And she was like, my friend Bridget was like, I never thought about that. But yeah, networking as a whole and, really, I mean, there's so many guys out there on the golf course right now. Yes. Shaking hands, making deals that, are making them billions of dollars. It's like, how do we shift that dynamic to where we make networking more accessible and equitable for all so that we all can be in the presence of opportunity? Because like both you and I, again, were, offered those opportunities. And I do agree too that like, I think that sense of us as women having to feel like we're never smart enough. I mean, I love my ladies. Our Together Digital group, they are here because they are constant learners. And I think that's good. I think it's a part of who they are. But I also do think a part of it is what you're saying. It's like how many certifications can I get? How many degrees can I get? Like, because what is it going to take for me to kind of move up? Yeah. And again, in the research for my book on the networking gap, education does not close the pay gap. Unfortunately, ladies, I'm so sorry.
It's unfortunate. Yeah.
Not to say you should ever stop learning. Huge fan of that.
Of course.
But at the same time, it's really not getting us further faster.
Yeah, and I will say that I don't know if you remember, but there like a couple of years ago, I think when I was at the White House, there was this whole thing around women should learn how to golf,
Yes.
because of that reason.
I flipped some tables over that.
So it was just like, okay, like
conform.
So now I have to like spend money to like I was just like, I don't, I'm not going to do that. But I got that advice often. Like you should learn how to golf.
Right. And it's so inaccessible from a financial standpoint, from like an ability standpoint. There's so many reasons why it might not. Not that I have anything against golf. Don't get me wrong. I like it. I don't mind it. I play it with family for fun. But yeah, it is kind of the.
Yeah.
I remember reading that article and it's cited in my book. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're like, women just conform and do what the men are doing. And that way, that's how you move up. It's like, really? Yeah. Is that the way it should be, though?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That's why we're here.
Right.
We're here.
We're doing what we're doing, right? All right. One more question before we go into the power round, which are our fun, fast questions. For those in our community who feel that they're on a non-traditional path, which actually in digital and marketing is very common, what advice do you give about leveraging their unique perspective and leadership strengths?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is like believe in yourself and your ability and your work. Like I feel like you could take as many classes as you want. You could do as many networking events as you want. Yeah. You can build the most amazing portfolio. But if you don't believe in the product you're standing behind or the person that you see in the mirror, it's going to, like, you can't keep up the facade for long, like before somebody's going to notice or you're going to crack, right? So I would say to believe in your abilities and believe in your talent, even if it doesn't look like somebody else's, which leads me to the second one of comparing. Like, I get it. I compare myself to people still. My book came out and I was like, am I going to sell as much as this person? Am I going to hit this list? I completely understand that. But what I would say is remember that you are one of one. So your perspective, your talent, all of those things, nobody else is going to bring, which means that your path is going to look different to someone else's. And I know we all hear it, but I'm going to reiterate that, like, you don't know what people have going on. Like, sometimes I look at the bestseller list and I found out, like, people were able to buy thousands of their books or whatever. And I'm like, oh my goodness, why didn't I, but I'm like, but I needed that money. Like I couldn't do that. I needed that money for other things. So watch your comparing, because especially with social media and everything nowadays, like things look way easier than what they are. And also just know that, like, your life doesn't have to be supersized. Like, for real, like, like, I'm starting to learn that I love the simple things, as we talked about earlier, going for a walk in the woods, just listening to some music, like going and sitting by myself and journaling at a coffee shop. Like, that's okay. Like, we don't have to have a curated life. Like, it's about being healthy, being happy, and believing that that you're one of one and that you are, you're worthy of everything that comes to you. And then don't be afraid of no's, y'all. Like, I know it's hard. I hate hearing no. It's so devastating to me when somebody's like, no, thank you. And I'm like, what? Or like, you're really great, but, and I'm like, but wait a minute, I work for Barack Obama. Why?
Right?
But I have to take it on the chin like everybody else and say, okay, that was just a circumstance. It's no indication of my value or worth. I just didn't get it. So know the difference in that too, that it's sometimes it's just circumstance. It's not you.
Yeah, exactly. I think, that's great advice for our job seekers out there right now too. I hear that a lot. Like, you even said something earlier, like, is that job posting even real? Because there are a lot of people fishing out there for like to build their bench, but not actually hiring. Is that when, being on the opposite side and looking for and hiring talent. I mean, I can tell you, like, we are a small business. We have like 3-4 people with us at any given time. And, we post up a job and I got like 700 resumes in 2 days. I had to turn the job posting off because I couldn't. I'm like, how am I going to go through all these? How am I going to respond to each of these individuals? So, whether it's a small company, big company, you kind of never know. And I know on the recruiting side, people are cutting down on that on this staff there. So it might be one person getting thousands. So really just know that there's not always you. It could be definitely a them thing. And I wholeheartedly agree with you too. It's one of my common phrases is, companion, and it's out there in the world too. Somebody else can take credit for it because I don't know who said it first, but comparison is the thief of joy. It's just, it can be such a vacuum for your emotions. And if you find yourself getting jealous or envious, another thing I like to remind myself is that envy is something you should actually pay attention to, because it's showing you what you want. Maybe the things that you're denying yourself and not recognizing for yourself, even if it's kind of vain or kind of like whatever, it's telling you that there's something out there that you want and you need to figure out how to go get it for yourself.
Yeah. And you're allowed to, you're allowed to want more too. You're allowed to want more. You're allowed to splurge on you're allowed to do these things. And I think that we just think that we have to stay in a neat, tidy box until somebody unwraps it and lets us out.
Now, don't wait for permission, ladies.
No.
Or guys, if you're listening and you need to hear it. Yeah, that's my next book too. I keep joking, is Unambitious. I think our generation, especially Deesha, has been conditioned to be like, we're just workaholics, man. It was get the degree, get the house, get the family, all of this. And then it's like, why am I doing all this? And we're all having these quarter midlife crises, induced by like the world and society in general as well. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that we are constantly striving, and it's always about how do I do better instead of just being. So I'm going off of the I just realized that you're undiplomatic and I'm unambitious. I love it. All right, let's see. Oh, that was our last question there, and our chat's quiet, so I'm going to move into the power rounds question. So
good.
What is one leadership quality that you wish was taught in every classroom?
Feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Have to give and receive.
That is a fantastic one. Yeah. That's a tough one, but fantastic. Most unexpected object in your office that inspires your work? I know you're not in your office right now because you're
No, but I there's an answer to this. I would say there's a poster of the Philadelphia sports teams.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, I would say that.
That's great. And that aligns. That's very authentically you, Deesha.
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
And on that note, we're gonna infuse two of your passions, authentic leadership and jazz, because I wanted you to finish the sentence, or you could say R&B. Authentic leadership is like jazz because
it's unpredictable and ever evolving.
Yeah, I kind of like jazz too, because it's like you got that whole
it's riffing and ever evolving. And I think about like the jazz of like the 30s, 20s and 30s, and the jazz of today. Like it's ever evolving.
I love it. That's a fantastic answer. What is the first thing you do when imposter syndrome tries to creep back in?
I meditate.
Love it.
Or pray if people believe in that. But I would say meditate or pray.
That's so great. Awesome. All right, Deesha, that was it. You flew through those. Great job.
You did good.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, absolutely. All of your insights on non-traditional leadership paths and creating authentic impact are so valuable for communities like ours. So I appreciate you being here with us again. And for our amazing listeners, they're dropping in and saying this was awesome. So thank you. Thank you, Ellen, for listening in. For everyone watching, remember that the Power Lounge recordings are available to everyone free after the event. You can check us out on YouTube. You can also basically follow and subscribe any place that you listen to your podcasts. And if you're not a Together Digital member yet, I invite you to join our community of amazing, smart, talented, and very generous women in digital who are always looking to share their knowledge, power, and connections. Again, togetherindigital.com if you want to check that out and learn more about our amazing membership benefits outside of just really finding your professional soulmates that just really transition any and every job.
Yeah, I'm like, I need to
every stage of life. Check it out, girlfriend. We got, I'll send you the details. Yes, Missy, Pamela, we're getting all kinds of love in the chat. So I want to make sure you see that before we hop off here with Deesha. All right. Thank you all again for listening. We hope to see you all next week on the Power Lounge. Until then, everyone, keep asking, keep giving, and keep growing. We'll see you next week. Bye. Bye.
Produced by Heartcast Media.